Welcome to the Boss It Weekly podcast, a no-nonsense, no-hype, frank and close-up analysis of what is currently working and what is not in the world of software. The Boss It podcast is packed with major takeaways for software business owners and managers. So, let's begin.
Hello, this is Mark Edwards and another Boss It podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Neal Schaffer, and well, we'll probably cover quite a few topics over the approximately the next 30 minutes, and we'll see how the time runs out. Interesting, because Neal used to be in B2B software sales, so he's got the right sort of background. He's author of 4 books, the latest of which is The Age of Influence. So I'll obviously be asking him quite a bit about that. But Neal, welcome to the Boss It podcast.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's truly an honor to be here.
Well, you've got the right background for us, so I think the next 30 minutes it's going to be really interesting. So I'm really looking forward to it. First of all, give us a bit of background about yourself. How did you get into this industry?
Sure. Well, I like to start before social media because my career has really been transformed into something different with social media maturing. Before social media, my background is in B2B sales, in technology in Asia. So I speak fluent Japanese and Mandarin Chinese, and I launched my career in Japan. So I started in semiconductor. I launched a China sales operations for a Japanese semiconductor company, was very successful, moved on to work with a American company that ended up getting bought out by Intel called Wind River. This is embedded operating system software, and all the clients of ours were consumer electronic manufacturers primarily. After that, I moved over to a Canadian startup called SBL and helped them launch their Asia sales. And we went from 0 sales in Asia to comprising 30% of global sales in 2 years. So that really holistic business experience in Asia, where I had to sell to many different cultures. And because I was regional VP Asia sales or country manager, I had to wear a lot of hats. So my background isn't marketing, but that's where I learned my marketing.
And when did the change in your career happen?
Well, it happened when I moved back to the United States, which you could probably tell from my accent, and I was still consulting for that Canadian startup. But at a certain point, I decided it was time to move on to potentially a broader industry. I was in a pretty niche software industry at the time. And this all happened right around the Lehman Brothers crash, which was the last great recession we had about 12 years ago.
Yes.
And that's where, I was looking for a job for the first time in the United States when my network was in Asia. So what do you do in 2008? I started with LinkedIn, and I realized that LinkedIn was such a powerful tool for relationship building that I started blogging about it. And that blog, when I did finding a job, which ended 3.5 months later because of the financial crisis, but I continued to blog, and that blog turned into a book, and the book really launched my career, and I launched my own consulting company related around social media marketing and social selling in January 2010, and I haven't looked back.
So your first book was primarily around LinkedIn, and when was that book published?
So that was published in 2009,
Okay.
and I was talking about how professionals and executives should use LinkedIn like you might use Twitter today.
Yes.
So be a little bit more open in who you follow, connect with people who you think might add value to your network, to your business, and you can reap tremendous benefits. It was more like an online networking guide to using LinkedIn in a very, very different way than it was being used at the time.
I mean, in the software tech sector, I think it lists 98% of the people that I ever speak to. So it is very, very popular. It's been very, very successful in that respect. I think LinkedIn itself has changed quite a lot. So what are the changes that you've seen? Because I guess some of the advice that you'd have given back then may be slightly different to what you'd be saying now.
Yeah, before I go back to the changes, just that power of LinkedIn, when I did get that job for 3.5 months, it was director of APAC business development for a network management system software company.
Right.
And I was able to, within those first few months, develop enough relationships through LinkedIn that I had a 2-week business trip lined up to visit, executives at 15 different telcos, satellite TV operators. These were our main client base, all throughout Asia. People that I'd never met before. And this was all done through LinkedIn. And this is 2008. So the power, I want to remind people, is still there. It's really what you do with
Yes.
it. So I think that we have seen an influx of a different demographic to LinkedIn, which is going to happen over the course of a decade. And in fact, here in the United States, and I'm sure in Europe and the rest of the world, it might be similar, but millennials now make up a majority of the workforce. So obviously it's going to change. The line between what you post on Facebook, what you post on LinkedIn has been blurred a little bit more. But I welcome the change. I think it leads to more openness in the platform. And whenever more people are open, it actually creates a lot easier to develop relationships with them.
Yes. So what are the changes you've seen?
Well, more and more people have joined is obviously the number one thing, which is great for all of us. It allows us to better map out all the people we want to reach in any company throughout the world. People are a lot more casual. So in the past, people were really, wanted to stay close to their network, didn't really want to venture out. Now you see people venturing out, posting more content, more personal content, maybe more commenting, maybe more engagement than we ever saw before. And I also think that, because LinkedIn is still that professional network, I do tend to feel that if your messaging is right, there has been so much bots or spam that when you genuinely have the right messaging that is relevant and appropriate and you are a person of the right stature when you reach out to someone, I do believe the success rate has gotten even higher on LinkedIn because of the fact that of all the spam and what have you. People really value those genuine relationships more than ever. And when you show yourself in a genuine way that's relevant, I believe you can be even more successful on LinkedIn today than you could have been in the past.
Because there's different ways that you can reach out to the people within your network and wider afield. You can publish articles, you can make sort of general posts, you can even send the email. What would be what are the general pointers that you would advise somewhere in software tech that's wanting to extend their network and do so with credibility?
Yeah, so I like to look at, first of all, your prospecting. Or you're looking for a business partner, what have you, you do your keyword search, you're going to find a lot of people. I think the key metric to look at is number of mutual connections. If you have a certain number of mutual connections with that person, I feel the chances are pretty high that if you reach out in a genuine way, that they will reach out back to you. Now, I have found that emails aren't always the most successful way of reaching out to people. I've found just a connection request and just genuinely saying, hey, we're in the same industry, we help companies like yours, or whatever that message is. I've found that to be extremely effective. So you don't necessarily have to pay, although there are benefits of Sales Navigator and the ability to do searches and more filters, what have you. But it's really just reaching out. But that number of mutual connections is huge because they're going to look at your profile. They're going to look at that number. If I only have one or two mutual connections with you, I'm not going to reach out to you. I'm going to reach out to other people first and build enough mutual connections so that when I reach out to you, it's clear that I have social proof, I have credibility. I can even maybe, name drop a few people, yes, especially if I know them personally. And that's key, as you know.
And just for those that may not be as familiar with using LinkedIn, the difference between in-mail and a connection request is with a connection request, you've got a fairly limited amount of text that you can put into your request, but it's free. But with in-mail, there's an allocated number of emails that you can send in a month, depending on which subscription you've got. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, the in-mail is a paid message.
Yes,
and the connection request is a 300 character. Hey, let's connect.
Yes.
And I think that when people get the messages, maybe they expect the sales call, the sales message. But those that are savvy at software sales know that it's all about solution selling and solving people's problems. And that's really what's going to make you successful when you reach out in a connection request, is work with a lot of companies in your industry, made a lot of people successful. We help solve these problems. Just want to connect so I can see if I can be of any service to you. Right? You're not selling, but you're also putting forward a very powerful message that you know the industry, you know the problems, and feel free to use me as a resource if you ever need one.
And what about general posts? Do you have any guidelines there when sending out posts? Because I've seen in some of the posts that we've sent out, vast differences in the engagement for them. Sometimes, you'll get very few, and other times it could be thousands in very, very quick time, few days.
Yeah, the LinkedIn, we call that the algorithm that determines what is seen in the news feed. So, and everyone in software should understand that concept.
Yes.
So, the algorithm on LinkedIn works like it does on any other social network. So, first of all, the type of content. Do you just put out a quote? Do you put out an image? Do you put out a link to a post, or do you put out a video? And they're all going to get very, very different results. Normally, videos seem to do best on most social networks, including LinkedIn. The timing is also important, and obviously the subject matter is important as well. So there's been a lot of talk about posts where, as salespeople and as executives, we tend to want to share links. We want to get people back to our website to learn more about our products and our company. And those are some of the worst performers out there. But the key is what I've heard a lot of marketers doing is actually creating videos and not even putting the link in the description, but in the first comment. So the
Yes.
video captures the algorithm. LinkedIn is saying, okay, there's no link in here. We're keeping people on the platform, which LinkedIn wants to do to sell more advertising. And then when people go into the comments, they see the link and they click over. Requires you to create a lot more video, but that is what a lot of marketers right now are recommending to get more visibility on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you're not the first person that I've heard that advise that, and I think we've used that quite successfully. So that is a very, very good tip. What about the length of the videos?
Well, I would normally say people are busy, but with this pandemic that we're in, people actually
Yes,
have.
they've just stopped being busy, haven't they? Yes, for most people.
Right, but I think to be able to pull people in and keep them watching for a long time is really asking a lot unless you're continuing to provide that value. I think it can be shorter. I think it can be, 1 to 2, 3, maybe most 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you want to bring them somewhere else if that's the intent. And therefore, if you make it too long and give away too much, they won't feel the need to go back to your website. So keep it short, make it a teaser. It's like the previews we see in the movie theaters of those movies coming out in the future, right? Make it a tease.
Yes.
And make it short and sweet. And I think those will do best.
And I think it's very much like, and I've had this discussion many, many times about copywriting. So many people say keep it as short as possible. And actually, I think that the advice is as long as you can keep the interest, because there are stats around that's proven that with copywriting, if it's really interesting and you can maintain that interest, then long copy can be more successful. But stop as soon as it stops becoming interesting, I think is probably the overall tip then.
Yes, I mean, it's storytelling,
Yes.
right? I've watched movies on Netflix where after the first minute, I'll stop watching because it didn't interest me. And so, if you're a great screenwriter, go for it. But if not,
Yes.
I would, shorter is going to be a safer bet most of the time. But yes, if you can keep people interested, if you have a great story to tell, then yeah, there's no limit really.
Brilliant. Okay, some good tips there, Neil. Thank you for that. Tell us more then about The Age of Influence, your recent book. What's that all about? Who's that aimed at?
Yeah, so probably my background in sort of serving customers through selling software has made all the content that I create about serving my audience and my community and what other executives and what others ask me, Neil, what do I do in this situation or that situation? So my second book on LinkedIn now is more about business sales and, social selling, social media marketing. Then I got asked questions about social media strategy, social media ROI, so I wrote a book about that. I'd say over the last 2 years, the number one question I get asked, because now I do more work on the marketing side, is about influencers. And it's not just about how to best leverage influencers or is it a fad? Is it for real? But also a lot of people come up to me saying, how do I become more influential? Or I'll have marketers come up and say, we want to make our CEO more influential in social media. What do we do? So the concept of digital influence, and the funny thing is when I worked in software, right, in order to get a sale, I had to work with a lot of partners. I think in B2B sales, especially in software sales, there's an ecosystem of different companies that you work with. So in embedded software, we had semiconductor vendors, right?
Yeah.
Who often gave us leads. We had value-added resellers. We had system integrators. We had this whole different network of basically influencers. And if I could develop relationships with them, I could get more leads.
Yes.
Or it would help me close deals, or I could get intel that would help me get leads or close deals. So the concept of influence in sales is the exact same way that I look at influencer marketing, that there are others out there that can help you get leads, close sales, deliver customer success, whatever it is. But now we're in a digital world. So offline, yes, everything stays the same. What else can we do online, digitally, that may help us do the same thing we've been doing offline? And that's why I think salespeople get this immediately, because when you work with people in influencers, in general, right, it's a sale because you reach out to 20 people, not everyone's going to respond, right? You have a pipeline. You always need to have fresh people in the pipeline. But those that do respond, you develop better and better relationships and you get the ROI. And that, if you can understand that, which I believe everyone listening to this can, you begin to see the potential for leveraging influencers digitally. And in B2B, we're not talking about Instagrammers or YouTubers. We're obviously talking about people on LinkedIn. It could be bloggers, it could be on Twitter, maybe on Facebook.
Do you have some examples of how you've seen influencers work? Some specific areas of the market, maybe people that were able to do that?
So I am actually working, one of my clients, part of what I do is a fractional CMO service. So one of my clients is in software, and they have a very, very unique software solution that helps people code more efficiently in these large remote work teams that we have developing software around the world. So their product is very relevant for what we're going through right now. So we are going full steam ahead on the sales and marketing. So obviously they have sales, they're mining LinkedIn for leads, they're doing Google ads. We're going to get them started because they're a startup, right? We're going to get them started on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn ads. So the role that the influencers play here is really you need to get content out there. Why not begin a conversation with influencers in your industry so that, first of all, they can be leveraged for content. Most people that I've influenced, their companies or themselves, are creating or sharing content. That's how they built up their community digitally. So I think that content piece is a great way to network, to begin and develop relationships with influencers, saying, we'd love to interview you. Much like a podcast interview, but on a blog, or we want to write a white paper, we'd love to have your input, or we want to do a webinar, we'd love to feature you on our webinar. Now, these people can't be competitors, but you can see how if you're going to create content and you want to generate leads, the fact of the matter is when you work with people like these people I'm talking about, often they're going to share this content or this webinar or this white paper with their own community because they're proud and honored to be a part of it, and it helps their personal branding. And this sort of, human emotion of being proud and personal branding and sharing when they're featured somewhere else is a natural human instinct that influencer marketing works very well on in the B2B space.
One of the things that we've spoken about on this podcast before, and I've definitely spoken with quite a few of my clients, is the danger of becoming what we call a content slave, where you enter the world of social media and you get onto a treadmill where you feel that the only way to gain attention is to create regular content, and then it becomes quite a chore, quite an overhead for you to continually be creating content of interest. What would you say to that?
It's funny because this particular software sales company, they hired an SEO expert before they hired me, and the SEO expert said you need 300 blog posts in order to rank on Google. And wow. We've already got the ranking on Google with way less than 100. So what I would say is the way to think of it in a positive way is, what are the 52 keyword search terms that you want to rank for? That is one blog post per week for a year. When you enter your second year, a lot of those you still want to rank for. You don't need to create new content. You can revise that old content and republish it. Some of the old content might not be relevant. Some of the keywords might not be relevant. You might have new keywords. So I do believe if you can stick to a one per week commitment over the course of a year, it's going to do you a lot of benefit. After that, you already have the basic infrastructure. It's revising. It is maybe phasing out old keywords and bringing in new. It gets easier over time.
One of the things I've also seen is organizations that when they start perhaps a new initiative around their brand, around this content marketing, that in the early days, they are very much on message, talking about some of the key strengths within that organization. But as time continues and they want to create fresh content, they can start to become a little bit obscure and start sending out messages that you start to struggle to see the connection really to who and what they do. Is that something that you've come across? And if so, how do you prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I think when you mentioned sort of that a slave to the content, when you don't think about it strategically and you're just creating content for content's sake, the quality can go down over time. So I think it is aligning that content. At the end of the day, when I talk to a lot of marketers and what do we blog about, what content do we create, I always tell them to go to their sales team, because the salespeople on the front line understand firsthand what problems your customers have.
Yes.
Right. I think that a lot of companies are great talking about products. They're not great talking about solutions. And all of your content should be focused on those solutions, right? You have product pages on your website where you talk about your product, but what are the pain points that you help your customers solve? And it's funny because I always, in previous books, I've talked about when I worked in software sales, I loved having my CEO come out from Ottawa, Canada, to meet with executives in Asia. And I'd be part of all those meetings. I always got access to, people higher up than me when I brought my CEO out. But he had stories. He had stories of all the different companies they've helped, how they created the company, the unique solutions they have. There's incredible amount of IP that every software company has. It's time to get that out into content. And maybe the best way is to interview CEOs, interview salespeople. There's a process that you need. I've heard of some companies that just have a Google Voice number. If you have a great story to tell, please dial this number, leave a message, and they'll create content from that. That was a software company here in the US. I thought that was a pretty brilliant idea. So really tap in to your IP, your stories, your experience, and always have that lens. And with this current pandemic, it's even more important. If your content isn't helping people in the situation they're in today, you don't want to publish it. And I would say the same anytime you want to publish content in social. That's the filter you want to look at it. Is it helping the problem that my customers have? If it's not, think twice.
There's been an awful lot of conversation about brand, and this has been an ongoing conversation for many, many years. But I think that there's also in the software tech a number of senior executives, a certain amount of cynicism, because I've seen the relationship with some marketing agencies that have been working with organizations to help them under this umbrella term of brand. And I think a lot of money has been spent on it, and the executives have seen little results. And I think that that's caused, let's say, a little bit of tension and a bit of cynicism. I've often heard it described as that fluffy marketing stuff, where I'm spending money and the marketing agency is sort of saying to them, well, this is a long-term thing and you won't necessarily see the results straight away. And they're wanting to see the revenue come in. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, this is where my sales background comes in, and I see an incredible amount of fluff in marketing as well. Branding is more of a consumer aspect. It's about creating this emotional attachment. But in the B2B world, you create emotional attachments with your company by delivering superior products and services and making your customers more profitable and happy. That's the best emotional attachment that you can build. So there is a minimum number, amount of branding. The way you depict yourself visually and across the internet should be consistent. And, part of branding is showing that consistent look and feel. And if you are shifting into a new industry, you're renaming your product, you want to do a reset on just your messaging. Yeah, I mean, in those situations, it may make sense to do a rebranding or to really invest in that. But I think if you're already successful as a company, I don't know if investing in the branding is going to do you better good than investing in other marketing channels. That being said, branding is one of these esoterical things, right?
Yes.
Where it's really hard to measure that ROI. And some of it is, if you're an executive, if you're a CEO listening to this, some of it's going to come down to a gut feel of sort of comparing the look and feel of your branding with that of your competitors. And if you feel you're happy with that, I think that's great. If you feel that for some reason you just don't think it looks nice enough or it's aligned with your market or whatever, then yeah, you may want to look into that. But yeah, branding can be a deep suck hole. It could be a black hole for marketing budgets.
Yes.
And I would just weigh that with everything else. Maybe a rebranding of the look and feel, maybe every 5 years as generations change. But it's definitely something I don't think you need to be doing on an annual basis for sure.
Let me bring you back a little bit to social media, because there's another question that I often hear, and there again some cynicism. Facebook, as an example, is being used more and more, and successfully, I can see, in selling products to individuals. There's also some companies out there that are doing some B2B marketing. What are your thoughts about
Mhm.
Facebook as a B2B for software companies?
So, as I hinted from my background, I do a lot of business in Japan. And in Japan, Facebook is like LinkedIn. So LinkedIn never made it there. I'll visit companies and I'll get Facebook friend requests that night.
Right.
I've got quotation requests over Facebook Messenger, and this is a B2B service that I offer. So I see that every culture uses social networking a little bit differently. I will say that the lines are being blurred where more people are getting more personal on LinkedIn, more people are getting more professional on Facebook. It would not be where I invest the most money. Obviously, for software sales, LinkedIn's going to be number one with Twitter number two. But if you wanted to test the waters, what Facebook does have over LinkedIn and Twitter is we know that a lot of people, most people are on LinkedIn, some people are on Twitter, but everyone is on Facebook.
Yeah.
So if we really want to try to grab someone's attention, Facebook is the way to do it. And they have a very robust advertising platform, which allows us to really track, target, create lookalikes. It is much more economically effective to do so on Facebook than with the current LinkedIn or even Twitter ad platform for that matter. So it does have that luring appeal. But yeah, people are not on Facebook to do work. So, but then again, when they see something and they think they may be able to use it for their work, even if it's the evening or weekend, there is a chance that they may click on that and try to learn more about you. So if you want to be everywhere, which marketers tell you, you need to have an omni-channel, be everywhere approach. Facebook would be that third network that I would consider, but definitely not a strategic network unless we're talking about the advertising.
And what about Twitter?
Twitter is, I believe for tech, Twitter is still a very, very powerful place to be. I think that in the tech industry, a lot of people still use it, not as many as LinkedIn or Facebook, obviously. But Twitter also inherently is a culture of clickers. They're used to seeing news or articles and they click on links,
Yes.
right? Where LinkedIn does not, LinkedIn wants you to stay in their platform, and the same with Facebook. Twitter really doesn't care.
Yeah.
They're in the process of they're in the business of giving you news. So I still find for my own website that of social media, Twitter drives the most traffic, and I still strategically invest in Twitter. Also, if your contact's on Twitter, right, you want to reach out to them on LinkedIn, there's only one mutual connection, but you go to their contact details and you notice they have a Twitter profile, it's going to be way easier to engage with them on Twitter because you don't have to deal with that whole connection thing. You just mention them, reach out to them, what have you. So Twitter is just another tool in your toolbox. It's not the end all, but if you find your prospect is on Twitter or your business partner, it can be a very powerful friend.
And also Twitter, there's an awful lot of video that's being used on Twitter, and it seems to be quite successfully being used with short video clips that are able to sort of pull people in quite successfully. Have you had much experience of that?
I've used Twitter, video over Twitter as much as LinkedIn, Facebook. I haven't seen any big difference in, they all seem to do better when you have video.
Right.
So yeah, I can't comment that Twitter is going to perform way better than others, but it wouldn't surprise me that people are finding success with video on Twitter.
What are the top mistakes that you see, particularly B2B with software tech businesses make? What are the top three things that spring to mind when we talk about the mistakes that organizations could be making? Because mistakes, it can be quite costly, especially when there's a marketing campaign that's put together. Maybe it's a marketing agency there. I see a lot of senior executives that do rightly pause before pushing the go button with a lot of marketing initiatives because it can blow up. What are the things to avoid?
Well, I think the first thing is treating social media as an advertising platform, right? Because it was really made for people, not for businesses. So it's not a place, obviously you want to promote what you do, but you need to do it in a little bit savvier of a way than treating every post like an advertisement. So this includes one advice that I give for every client of mine that's in B2B is this concept of content curation. So you want to provide solutions, you want to provide great content, but you don't just want to be talking about yourself all the time. Yeah. And this is something for a lot of executives that's very counterintuitive. But when you start offering industry-wide information that doesn't come from competitors, but it comes from authoritative sources, it could come from influencers, it could come from partners, non-competitors. But when you offer content above and beyond your own company, that's when you really begin to build a lot of trust with other users. And also that other content helps bring in new followers and helps you build brand awareness in your industry. So that's the first mistake. Maybe I said, two mistakes together is, treating it as an advertising platform and not sharing enough of other people's content so that you become an essential industry channel that people tune into.
Yes. Do you have a third?
So the third mistake I'd say is remembering that at the end of everybody that reaches out to you on social media as a person, they could be a prospect. They could be an executive that wants to partner with your company, what have you. So really remembering that engagement aspect, and don't just wait for people to engage with you. It's okay to proactively engage with others as well. So with Facebook, you can't do that. You need to wait for people to engage with you. But on Twitter, you can, and on LinkedIn, you can't either. Although with a LinkedIn company page now, you can engage with other posts that use these 3 hashtags that you determine. And I would, make sure that I proactively engage with those. But on Twitter, you can engage with anyone you want. You can follow anyone you want. So I would use Twitter, specifically to my advantage and really proactively engage as if I was a person, if I'm representing a company. And I think that most companies, either they're afraid, they don't understand that aspect, they sort of wait for people to come to them, when a lot of the magic in social media happens when you reach out to others.
Brilliant. That's very good tips. I like that. What's the really big takeaway, if you like? We've just gone over the 30 minutes here. So if there was one thing that you would recommend to a B2B software tech company to do, what would that one thing be, the really big takeaway?
I think the big takeaway in all this is I like to, put a sanity filter on all this, because I know it can be very challenging. It can be very confusing. There's a lot of fluff out there.
Yes.
I like to say that social media replaces nothing, yet complements everything. If your business is doing great without social media or with whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Don't listen to anybody. Right? The best expert are the people that are doing it for you.
Sure.
But if you are trying to do more, generate more brand awareness, more web visits, more lead generation, more sales, social media is a very, very powerful place that can augment everything else you're doing. You're not going to throw away the playbook, right? You're going to keep the course. But by shifting a little bit of budget into social media, into content, and the content is going to help you in social as well as with SEO, and be thinking about relationships with influencers as part of social media and other people that can really help push your message out there to more and more people, give your company credibility. There's a lot of different tools out there when we talk about social media that, the engagement, the content, the influencers, that paid social aspect. So it is a place where I do believe if you have not been investing enough, or if you haven't seen the ROI, that you need to understand there's a lot of different ways to develop it, and you need to keep at it, because I do believe that for any company, the ROI is there in any one of these outlets that I just talked about when you do it right. So that's my big takeaway. It's not the end all. It doesn't replace everything, but it can be a very, very powerful friend, and it should be a powerful friend, because we know the number one thing people do online is social media. We can't ignore it. We need to just learn how to adapt it to how we do business. And I think it is actually a very, very natural adaptation, and it becomes muscle memory. It's not rocket science. The more you do it, the better you get
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think that there are a number of organizations that I've spoken to that their attitude is, we've tried it and it didn't work, and we're not wasting any more money on that stuff. You just haven't done it right yet. And it's like anything. If you want to get good at it, you need to practice at it regularly, and you need to keep thinking. So a good final tip there. Excellent.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more tip, because
Go for it.
When I launched my career in social media, I started as a consultant, not an agency. So as a B2B salesperson, I did not have an agency background. I didn't necessarily trust agencies either. In fact, I didn't even launch my own agency.
You're going to join a big club in that not trusting agencies, I can tell you.
Yeah, and I launched my own agency because I had a particular startup that said, Neil, we want to do everything you tell us to do. We don't have the resources. Yeah. Will you help implement for us? And that's when I launched it. But I'm not going to say I'm anti-agency, but agencies are in the business of making money off you.
Yes.
Right? So you need to have enough information and experience to be able to understand, are they providing you value or not? Does that price that they put on, is it something you could do in-house, or is it something you need them to do for you? really think twice about, and you're probably already thinking twice about those relationships, but that's what's always going to happen. And I think that, my latest book being about influencer marketing, just to close on that, it really got a bad name because you might have I worked with a B2B marketing author, and they were working with an agency on his Facebook and Twitter. And the agency was pushing lifestyle influencers like skateboarders, and YouTubers that were completely irrelevant to this author's, target audience of executives. And so therefore, agencies will do that. They will push anything and everything out there that people are talking about as a way to make money. But you need to obviously have enough experience and intelligence to be able to say, this makes sense, this doesn't. And if it doesn't make sense, don't do it.
Brilliant. So the name of your book again, and it's published by HarperCollins?
Correct.
The Age of Influence, the Power of Influence to Elevate Your Personal Brand, was it? Your brand.
Your brand. I hate to use that word after we just talked about branding.
Sorry about it. I didn't set that up so well for you, did I?
The book is universal, whether you're B2B, B2C, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a government organization, whether you're a politician. The concept is universal.
That's brilliant. Well, I've been writing down some of the points that you're making, and I've got 2 pages of a mind map here. So you covered a lot of topics. So well done on that. Thank you very much for joining me. I've enjoyed talking to you. It's been great, Neil.
The pleasure's mine, Mark.
Super.
Thank you.
That was the Boss It podcast. I would say in this time of COVID-19 is keep thinking, keep focused, work on your business, stay indoors, stay safe. Thank you very much.